Hey everybody, welcome to Drive-Thru Review 320. Today we're going to talk about Paydirt. This is a new game from Crash Games. This was on Kickstarter about last year or so, maybe earlier this year. Designed by Tor Neiman, the designer of Alien Frontiers, and it plays 2 to 5 players. Now, the theme of the game is basically Alaskan gold claims and gold mining, and each player is running their own company. They are auctioning for claims and equipment and personnel and all kinds of good things like that. So let's jump into how the game works, and I'll come back and tell you what I think about it. Now, each player is going to have their own player board. You can see each player starts the game with 5 meeple workers that they can use during the work phase. Then each player starts with 1 claim. This is called your Greenhorn Cut claim. And you can see here there's 3 tiles on here, and these are barren tiles. And these tiles are drawn from a random set of barren and gold tiles. You also have rich and promising. And you're going to put these face down, and as you go through the game and start to excavate and work these different claims, you're going to get a varying amount of gold. Players also start with some workers off to the side, not yet in their supply, and also $9,000 cash. Now, the object of the game is to get the most gold. The winner will be the one with the most gold, and you get that by extracting the claims, working the claims, and the money is going to be used to buy new personnel, get more workers, get better equipment, and all that kind of good stuff. So the first part of the game is the auction phase, and you're going to be auctioning on one of 3 different types of items in the game. That's going to be equipment, personnel, or claims themselves. You're going to deal out 3 from each of the piles. So 3 equipment, 3 personnel, 3 claims. And then the start player, whoever has this giant wooden yellow hard hat, is going to auction off one of the items. Now let's say we've auctioned off a personnel, and this Killian Igneous was auctioned off and purchased. We're going to go ahead and place the marker on top of the personnel. So the next auction has to be either equipment or claims. And so if somebody chose to auction off equipment next, then you can auction off personnel or claims in the next turn. And then you just keep auctioning until you sold off a number of items equal to the number of players. So in a 3-player game, we've auctioned off 2 equipment and a personnel, and that's it. Then we're going to move into the work phase. Now, that's interesting implications based on the number of players. So it actually makes the 2-player game actually work, which is very interesting in an auction game, which doesn't usually work with a 2-player game. Because you're blocking off the column, you can effectively sort of try to block out your opponent. If you see a nice piece of personnel or equipment or whatever that they're going to have useful for them, then you can trigger an auction off maybe a claim that you can afford, so that we block off the claim for the next phase because they've got a lot of money and you don't want them getting that really good claim. So there is some gamesmanship that you can do, and it's nice because, like I said, it's a 2-player game and the auction actually does work. So that's pretty cool. So let's take a look firstly at the equipment. Here you can see this one has a minimum bid of $2,000. It's an excavator. It has 2 areas with which to excavate gold, as well as spots for 2 wear tokens. And what you do is you cover up excavators with other excavators, and it's going to allow you to more quickly process the different gold claims that come through. As you take actions to process some of the gold, it's going to be a lot better if you have a loader, for example, that has 1 slot instead of 3. So it's going to take you a lot less time to process that gold. Next, we've got the personnel. Again, you can see the minimum bid in the upper right, and then they're going to have sort of special ability here. For example, Killian says, claim hardships do not affect you. Now, I'll talk about hardships, but at the end of the round, there's going to be hardships that are distributed to each of the players. Killian here will help mitigate those. Some of the personnel will have this little meeple icon here. When you buy one of these, you get to add a new meeple to your labor force. So I got to say, I really like this aspect of the game where you get a new worker, but that worker has a little bit of a special ability. He kind of blends in with the rest of your team. He can do different things, but he's got that little piece of character to him that's going to help you and help your company in general. A lot of times, this isn't really a worker placement game. It is, I'll show you in a second, it's got some worker placement stuff to it. But I like that. I go and I get a new worker, just like every other worker placement game ever, but hey, this guy's a little bit different. He's going to help me out in a unique way. Finally, you can auction off and win a claim. You're going to take, in this case, a Grizzly Value, which has a minimum bid of $2,000. Put that to the side of your player board, and then grab the appropriate markers and place onto the claim. So now we go into the action phase, and players will simultaneously distribute their worker. Most of the time you're going to be putting them on top of the different equipment, and then as you can see, as the workers are there, you're going to start pulling these different items across into your various equipment and moving them along until finally, once it goes through your wash plant, you're going to go into the gold reserves, flip over the tile, see how much gold you find, and then leave your gold there. Now, as you can see, as that gold moved through to the different equipment. Each time a new tile hits a piece of equipment, you're going to add a wear marker to it. The other thing you can do with your workers here is add them to the bottom of these equipments. And for each worker on there, you can remove up to 2 wear tokens. There are 2 central spots on the main board that you can place workers. One is the sales office. For each worker you place in the sales office, you can sell your gold nuggets for up to $3,000 each. You might need to do that if you're running low on money. And you can also place them in the gear supplier. So up until this point, everything has been simultaneous, at least in regards to worker placement. Now the gear supplier spot, you do have to consider turn order. So you have a spot there you can buy one of 2 different types of gear and add to your player board. So in turn order, then in that case, you have to figure out who gets first dibs onto the gear supply spot. And there's 2 types of gear. There's claim gear and camp gear. You can have one of each. And for example, here we have this bulldozer, and this gives us the ability once per turn to add a wear token to this piece of gear, and then you can discard any 2 pay dirt tiles from an active claim, replace it with a pay dirt tile of 1 better. So it's a way to upgrade the type of gold you might find there. And for example, here's an ATV. It's a type of camp gear that we can use, and this gives us the ability of 1 worker sent to the sales office or gear supplier may be used again into your mining camp. So again, it gives you some mobility for your workers. Finally, after everybody's completed their action phase, you're going to deal out hardship cards to the players. Now, the player with the least amount of gold is going to get their choice of hardship. So they're going to take and pick and choose a hardship card, pass it to the next player with the second least, and so on. Now, the final player to look at the hardship card is going to be the one with the most gold, so they're going to have the least amount of choice in terms of what's going to happen to them. And you're also going to look at the minus degree modifier there, and then you're going to move the degree track down that many spaces. The game will end after the round where it hits 0 degrees Celsius. Finally, each player gets $2,000 in residual income to end each round. So what do I think of this game? Well, it's interesting because you don't see an auction game that much anymore. You used to see auction games all the time, but that's kind of gone by the wayside. This is doubly interesting because it's an auction game that actually works well with 2 players because of the whole blocking thing that I showed you. So that gets a little bit of a plus on that side as well. It's got a lot of nice thematic integrations. You know, you're mining gold in Alaska, you're taking risks on different claims, managing equipment, managing and repairing that equipment. And I like the cool special abilities as you acquire different types of workers. It's not just like a generic worker, it's a specific character, a different person. He's got some different attributes to bring to the team. So that's really cool. The components are great, the gold pieces are awesome, all the artwork and everything is good on the equipment. And so it's a very interesting game. It's got a basic core of just you auction a couple things and you just move your workers around and manage the gold and manage the repairs, and then you keep going from there. I like the hardships because it is Alaska and it shouldn't just be, generic worker placement all the time. It should have some hardships that you have to deal with. And that kind of adds to the learning curve. You've got the auction learning curve of how much stuff is actually worth. It's not always worth what it tells you, and you got to learn that through multiple plays. And you've got the different hardships that you have to be kind of aware of what could happen to you. And there's a little bit of gamesmanship with moving the gold through because if you get the most gold, then you have the least say in which hardship you got to play and deal with. Whereas you have the least gold, you get first pick of the hardships, which is kind of a nice catch-it mechanic, but also a way of trying to time and when you get your gold out. So yeah, it's a nice solid game, a good auction game. It's got some modern mechanisms with the sort of combo abilities and things you can get on some of the gear and the equipment. So that makes it interesting. It's going to make the game different, a little bit each time as well. So anyway, that's Pay Dirt. Thanks.